To my colleagues, thank you very much. We're trying to fix a problem that most Americans would just be astonished exists, but it does. And to the people in the Charleston area, I've heard your voices, and let me tell you right quickly the problem that we're trying to fix. Alice Boland is a young lady that in 2005 threatened to kill the president, members of Congress, and a police officer as she came across the Canadian border into the United States. She had family in Beaufort, South Carolina. They did the investigation about the threats she made, and I will not read the threats because some of them are pretty tough. It resulted in her being arrested and indicted for threats against the president. She went before a federal judge. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered. Antipsychotic drugs were administered to make sure she was competent to stand trial. She went to a evaluation facility. The court declared Ms. Boland legally insane and a substantial risk to others in 2005, a federal court. She pled not guilty by reason of insanity and was ordered to undergo commitment proceedings for long-term care, of which she received. Fast forward to 2013. In 2013, this young lady, who is a paranoid schizophrenic, previously pled not guilty by reason of insanity, threatening to kill the President of the United States, was admitted to a mental health treatment facility, found by a federal court to be a risk to herself and others, went to Waldoboro, South Carolina in February of this year and legally purchased a firearm. She submitted the background, she filled out the paperwork for a background check. And according to the ATF authorities in South Carolina, there was nothing illegal about her entries. She was sold the pistol. She went to Ashley Hall, a private school in Charleston, South Carolina, presented herself at the school, and used the gun, trying to kill staff members. The gun did not fire, thank God. It was a semi-automatic .22 pistol, and the gun did not fire, but she legally bought a firearm after having been in federal court and found to be dangerous to herself and others, passed a background check. And what have we learned? That our current system has major gaps in it. And this legislation, this bipartisan, and I want to thank Senator Begich and Pryor and Flake for helping fix this major flaw in the system. We have legislation that will make sure that in the future, people who find themselves in this legal category of having gone to a federal court and pled not guilty by reason of insanity, having been a judge by a federal court to be dangerous to themselves and others, would no longer be able legally to pass a background check. There are a lot of emotion around the gun violence issue, but I am hopeful this is one area where we can find tremendous bipartisan support to fix what I think is a gaping gap in our law. And to the people of Charleston, South Carolina, I just thank God every day that the gun did not discharge. And I will do everything I can with my colleagues to make sure that this mistake is fixed. And in South Carolina, there's an effort at the state level to record all adjudications finding someone mentally incompetent or dangerous to themselves and others, and entering that data into the federal system so people who are in that category in South Carolina at the state level cannot buy a gun. I think there's over 14,000 that would fall in that category. So we're trying to make advancements at home to help fix this problem. With that, I'll turn this over to Senator Begich, who helped co-author this legislation.
Thank you very much, Senator Graham, and thank you for bringing this issue. I was familiar with it on some level, but Senator Graham clearly had an incredible story to be told and what happened in his home state, and it made it very apparent how we needed to fix this. So thank you, Senator Graham, for coming forward and working on this, and as well as my two other colleagues, Senator Pryor and Senator Flake. You know, I was pleased to help negotiate part of the bill to strengthen the background check system while protecting both gun and mental health rights. Currently, the system, as defined and detailed here, has many holes in it. Dangerous people can fall through the cracks, in part because the background check system lacks a clear definition of mentally incompetent. By creating a clear definition, this bill will help prevent individuals with dangerous mental health illness from buying guns. Granted, this is only part of the solution to reducing gun violence, but it's an important step forward. In addition, the bill will strengthen the rights for people with mental health illnesses. It provides a specific definition of mentally incompetent. That only includes individuals involuntarily committed to treatment. This bill also creates a clear pathway to recovery within the system. The changes are outdated and offensive terms such as mentally defective. When addressing the complicated issues of violence in our communities, we must neither stigmatize mental health nor abridge the Second Amendment rights. This bill is a step in the right direction. I would like to thank the NRA as well as the National Council on Community Behavioral Health Care and the National Alliance on Mental Illness for their contributions to this effort. We worked closely with both these groups in order to try to make sure we could have a bill that made sense and could be implemented. So again, it's just an honor to be here, a part of a bipartisan effort. And I want to echo what Senator Graham said. You know, here's a bill that has strong bipartisan support, as you see here today, from varied members of the Senate. Hopefully, as we go on in this debate, this is one of those bills that could move forward and pass the Senate as well as the House and move on. It's clear that the language needs to be fixed. This is one way to do it and also create some consistency in the law, while at the same time protecting those who are experiencing mental illnesses. Let me turn it over to Senator Flake next.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come out in support of this legislation. You know, in Arizona, after the shooting of Gabby Giffords just a couple of weeks ago, Mark, Kelly, and Gabby came to Capitol Hill and talked about some of the shortcomings of our background check system. In Arizona, they pointed out that there are more than 120,000 mental health records. These are records, people that have been adjudicated at the state level, and those are not part of the NCIS system. There's something wrong when that is the case. Now, this piece of legislation and perhaps some other things that we can do will allow individuals to be able to, or allow the authorities to determine who is incapable and should not be in a position to get a weapon. I appreciate the time that's gone into this, particularly by the primary sponsors, and I'm glad to support it here today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Well, after the shootings in Connecticut, I've spent a lot of time with people in Arkansas asking them about gun issues. We certainly have people that call in and say, you need to do something. But also, one of the things that we recognize in our state is the overwhelming majority of gun owners are law-abiding citizens. And they are completely responsible gun owners. And they have those guns for various reasons. And it is something that in our state, gun ownership is something that people take very, very seriously. So as part of my discussions, what I've done is I've reached out to prosecutors and local police, and I've even been to gun store owners to talk to them, and of course many, many, many gun owners in the state of Arkansas. And one of the things I keep hearing is they say, let's enforce the law we have on the books. Well, this is a way to do that. What we're doing is we're taking an existing law and we are improving the integrity of the database of the background check that currently exists. And I hear that a lot, that people say that the laws we have on the books can be improved, the system can be improved, there are holes, there are gaps. We've heard some of that already today. But I hear that around the state of Arkansas and from around the nation. And I think that this is about today, is to try to improve something that we do have on the books that we think will work and be effective. Of them who I'm standing with today for their approach on this. And one of the things I love about this effort is it's bipartisan. And if we're going to get things done here in Washington, we have to do it in a bipartisan way. Whether you're liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, House, Senate, doesn't matter. If you want to get it done in Washington, it needs to be done in a bipartisan way. And that's a very important piece of this legislation. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions about this?
What are the agencies that are responsible for reporting that information to the database, and is there a role for the states to also turn over whatever information they have?
Well, the regulations defining mentally incompetent doesn't pick up a not guilty by reason of insanity finding. So we're going to change the federal regulations. This happened in the federal system to better define, as Senator Begich said, the objective here. The objective is after you've had a competent court find that you're a danger to yourself and others, to capture that. There's due process appeal rights and all of these systems. But in Ms. Boland's case, pleading not guilty by reason of insanity of trying to kill the president doesn't disqualify you under the current background system. I think 99.9% of Americans will say that's a mistake, it needs to be fixed, and we're going to fix it. Now, as to the state system, I think you made a good point. I don't know how many state adjudications there are in the United States where people have been found by a competent court to be a danger to themselves and others that are not into the federal system for background check purposes. There's, I think, 14,000 in South Carolina. So my state legislature is trying to fix that problem by requiring our state law enforcement division to take all of these adjudications and put them into the federal system. And I would urge every state to do that, just like Jeff has said. You know, we've got thousands of people out there who have had their day in different courts and have found to be dangerous to themselves and others that the system doesn't know about when it comes to gun purchases. Whatever differences we have, I think this is one area we should be able to rally around.
I think it's good.
Okay. Senator, under the current law, Alice Boland, who you use as a good example, would be allowed to go to a gun show and buy a gun. This would not change it. Are you still okay with leaving those loopholes in place?
The question about regulating private sales at gun shows, what's a private sale? The one thing I'm not ever going to support is if I buy a shotgun for Mark, or if I give one to a family member, I'm not going to take a federal system that and put that into the federal system. That's just not practical. I think there's some work being done with Senator Coburn about someone taking private firearms to a public place to sell them as to whether or not they should go through the background check process. I think that is a work in progress, but I would just add this one fact. In 2010, there were 76,000 people who failed a background check, and there were only about 62 prosecutions. 19% of those who failed a background check in 2010, 13,862 people, were fugitives from justice. And not any of them were picked up. I mean, clearly, we've got a long ways to go to improve the current system. You know, one, if you're dumb enough to go try to buy a gun when you're on the lam, we need to catch you. I mean, imagine this. Someone who is a fugitive from justice goes in to buy a gun, fills out the form, they pop up in the system as being a fugitive from justice, and nothing ever happens to them. I think that's a good place to start fixing that current system.
Is this the limit of what you would support with background checks? The bill that Senator Coburn is looking at?
I'll just speak for myself. Tom Coburn is a good friend, and anything that Tom Coburn thinks is a good idea, I will certainly look at closely. If they can ever reach a bipartisan agreement about the problem you just indicated with background checks, I would be open to looking at their work product, but I would say this, as my colleagues have said, we have a background check system that really doesn't create any deterrent. So what if you fail a background check? It's against the law to fill these forms out, and go look at the form. They're not confusing. It's against the law to fill these forms out, and if you break the law and nothing ever happens to you, my concern is expanding the amount of paper that we do nothing with is not the deterrent we're looking for.
If I can add one other part to that, and that is, you know, what you see us doing today is we're finding a piece of the puzzle that you can get a fairly strong bipartisan support on. And we think, you know, we don't want to get caught up in all the other issues, but let's try to move forward and make some difference. I will tell you, as a former mayor, we went after these issues of guns and gangs and drugs, and we did something very simple. I'll tell you, as this described about the people who are crazy enough to go buy a gun and think they can get away with it by filling out a form, know they're a felon, and not having prosecution is unbelievable. Because as a former mayor, what we had to deal with was felons who had guns. And what we did is a very simple thing. We actually hired 2 city prosecutors. We made them and assigned them to the U.S. Attorney's Office. One focus, guns, gangs, and drugs. And I'll tell you what happened real quick. Because once you sentence someone on a gun case on a state court, the odds are they'll serve maybe 60 days and out they go. In a federal court, it's 5 years, mandatory. So what do you think happened in the street when they started finding out we were putting people away for 5 years for a felon carrying a gun. It circulated very quickly on the street, and less gun offenses were occurring because it's a very tight community out there. If you look at where these gun offenses occur over the whole country, the thousands of gun cases, sizable amount are related to criminal activity, guns, gangs, drugs, those types of activities. So we entered in a very fast pace and tried to deal with this. What we're trying to do here is we recognize there's an inconsistent language as proven by the case that Senator Graham had just talked about. So the goal here is try to clean up the language, get it clear and simple, and then also start having this, the NICS system actually reference this type of case. At the same time, be very careful of not stigmatizing those who have mental illness. For example, one of the pieces here, it would make it clear if the legally disabled disability no longer applies to that person and have been found to be recovered and have gone through a process, then they're back into their legal rights. But we tried to clarify something that's been very confusing. And so that, I guess, my point is, you know, you're always going to have a lot of issues on the table over the next several weeks, but we found one that we think solves a significant problem, bipartisan support, and we believe has a great chance of moving forward through the system.
Let me just make a point on, if there is any item in this whole gun violence debate that can make a difference, a real difference, I think this is it. In other words, to make sure that we better integrate and strengthen the background check to include those who are not mentally able or not should not have guns in this way. When you think about it, if you're a criminal out to get a gun, you typically have criminal networks where you might not be able to get it at a gun show or a private sale, but you get it somewhere else, or just go, you know, check the background system and you aren't going to be caught anyway if you're a criminal, it sounds like. But in the case of people with mental health issues, often they are loners. There are people without these networks. There are those that if they are turned down, it may delay them long enough where there might be some type of intervention or something that could stop them from the path that they're on. And I think when you look at the case of Jared Loeffner, he had not been adjudicated, so this would not have applied to him. But those like him, it just seems that if you want to make a real difference, here's where you can make a real difference.
Take two more questions. And
what about very often when the issue of mental health or illness comes up as far as guns are concerned, you often have veterans groups who
right.
Bring up the issue of PTSD or PTSD, whether very recently or in the past during Vietnam, et cetera, et cetera. How does this law address that?
Well, this law captures decisions by courts that have found someone to be a danger to themselves or others. In this case, a finding of not guilty by reason of insanity was lost to the system. It will now be captured. People with mental health problems need to have due process. We're not going to take your Second Amendment rights away because somebody said something bad about you down the street. You know, people spread rumors about your mental health. If you had an episode in the military where you're receiving treatment, I think the system needs to have a mechanism as to whether or not we can determine in a rational way that disability renders you unsafe to yourself and others. So this is a delicate balance, and what we've tried to do is capture court decisions. And when courts have rendered verdicts, and there are over 14,000 people apparently in South Carolina who have been adjudicated a danger to themselves and others by a competent court, not in the system, and that's what we're trying to fix. And your example, we just have to be careful how far we go.
Senator Graham, can I just add one?
Yeah, please.
Let me just, again, that part I just mentioned also is very critical in regards to making it clear that legally disabled no longer applies after the person is found to have recovered from mental illness. This is a piece of the equation that you're referring to. And the other piece is, and just to make sure it's clear, the verbiage, where it used to be, is adjudicated as a mental defective. Now it is adjudicated mentally incompetent. That's an important distinction. We worked with the mental health community to get that distinction correctly done because of the issue you brought up as well as some others.
Senator Graham, Senator Flake also introduced a bill this week that would improve the existing law having to do with
Straw purchases?
the straw purchases and trafficking. Is that something you could support?
Well, I understand Grassley and Leahy are working on trying to find a bipartisan. Yes, if we can find bipartisanship on, all of us want to punish people who go out and purchase a gun make a straw purchase. It's already illegal. We're just trying to tighten up the law. I'd be willing to certainly look at what they have. If Grassley and Leahy can agree, pretty good chance this thing may happen.
Senator Pryor, how about you, Senator Pryor? Now, we hear a lot from Lindsey Graham about a lot of different things, but the three of you, were new to this.
I think there's a compliment in here.
Where you guys are on the various bills that are out there.
Well, from my standpoint, I'm not on Judiciary Committee, so I won't have a chance to vote on them until they get through that process. So I'll look at them as they come through. You know, like I said, I think we ought to enforce the law we have on the books, and if you kind of take that general approach, then you start getting into areas like straw purchases, like cleaning up databases, like things like that are already there, but maybe not be working very well right now. So I'm like Senator Graham. I look forward to seeing what the Judiciary Committee comes up with. I would hope that it would be bipartisan, whatever it is. You know, I've already come out and said that I'm opposed to Senator Feinstein's assault weapons ban. I said that on the day after she filed it. But nonetheless, we'll look at things as they are presented. I think right now it's from my standpoint, because I'm not on the committee, it's still relatively early in the process, because they have a process they'll go through in the committee, and I know you have a lot of senators working very hard to try to get something through the committee, and once that happens, we'll look at it and see.
Thank you.